call to order the Finance and Governance Committee for July the 13th, 2021. Madam Clerk, roll call and posting of the agenda.
Councilmember Turan,
Here.
Councilmember Basua,
Here.
Chair Zaragoza.
Here.
The
Please.
agenda for this meeting was posted in the City Hall Bulletin Board on July 8th, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Please join me to salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, our next item is public comments not on the agenda, and I have two persons that like to speak. It's Andrea Payne, followed by Douglas Partello.
Mayor, at the moment, our two speakers are not available.
Okay, then we'll come back to that. So then our next item C is consent agenda items. And the first item is the City Clerk Department approval of the minutes. A recommendation that the Finance and Governance Committee approve the minutes of April 13th, 2021 regular meeting as presented. Council members, any committee members, any concerns or additions, subtractions of the minutes? If not, we need a motion.
I'll move approval of the minutes as presented.
I will second.
Approval by Councilmember Turan and second by Councilwoman Basua. Roll call.
Councilmember Turan,
Yes.
Councilmember Basua,
Yes.
Chair Zaragoza.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you. Our next item is reports, item D. This is Billing and Licensing Department. And the subject is discontinuing of approximately $500,000 of subsidy for the convenience of fee cost associated with accepting credit cards, debit cards, electronic checking, and payment methods for certain city services and fees. And the recommendation is the City Council, Finance and Governance Committee recommend to the City Council, number one, to conduct a public hearing to consider the establishment of fees to cover the cost of banking convenience fees for the use of credit cards, debit cards, electronic check transactions for certain city services and for certain fees, charges, or taxes due to the city. And two, following the public hearing, adopt a resolution establishing fees to cover the cost of banking convenience fees for the use of credit cards, debit cards, electronic check transactions for certain city services and for certain fees, charges, or taxes due to the city. And is required by Measure M. This was pre-recorded presentation. And council members, we have Eden. I'm sure it's Eden that's going to be available for any questions that you might have at this time. Okay, Councilmember Turan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Salamari, for the information for the item that's in front of us. And I'm just hoping that without reenacting the presentation, if you could just take a moment to inform for the benefit of the public what it is we're looking at in front of us and how it is and why it is that we have this decision in front of us right now.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the committee. We are here to ask that the committee recommend that we recommend to the council the discontinuance of the subsidy for the convenience fee, which costs the city about $500,000 annually. So the city of Oxnard accepts different kinds of payments, including credit card, debit cards, and electronic check payments. These payments are accepted for the different types of charges, like utility charges, and for different fees, like permit fees, business taxes, recreation fees, and many others. So as our customers use credit cards and electronic checks as a method of payment, we, the city, have to subsidize the merchant cost, which includes the gateway fees, the Visa and MasterCard fees or merchant cost, and the processing cost. These are supported by different types of vendors like Paymentus that are listed on one of the PowerPoint presentations. So we have Paymentus, for example, as our gateway, Visa and MasterCard for the interchange, and then Telecheck for our electronic checks. So in summary, we are asking if the committee will recommend that we stop the subsidy for those credit card transactions that we are not passing the fees to our customers and are available for us to stop the subsidy. These are usually for utility bills, payments, and for other charges. We calculated what would be the average rate that we can use so that we will stop this subsidy. And based on the study of the past 3 years, for over-the-counter and for electronic check payments, the average rate would be 2.35%. That will allow the city to recover as much as possible of the actual subsidy without charging any extra or collecting more than what we are already spending. So we also compared that with what other cities are charging. For example, Thousand Oaks is charging 2.65%. City of Ventura is charging 3% for in-person payment, and Ventura County is charging 2.15%. So the 2.35% is not in the highest, is not one of the highest rates that a city would charge. Compare that with other cities like La Cañada, Flint Ridge, they charge 3%, and City of Truckee charges 3%. So in order for us to proceed with this, if the committee will recommend proceeding with presenting this to the City Council, the council must have a public hearing. They must hold a public hearing, and then we will do some testing after that. And then by fall, we're hoping that it will be implemented.
Thank you. Good presentation.
Oh, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
I had a quick follow-up. Thank you very much
Okay.
for that explanation. I hope that the public was able to see and understand this item that's before us. And just as a follow-up to that, the fees that are generated when a customer or ratepayer pays with a credit card, pays fees that are due to the city with a credit card, right now they are not charged that fee and the city absorbs that cost. Is that correct?
Right.
There are many programs in the city, and some are already passing it on to the customers. And there are some that are not. And the reason for that is because the different departments had to contract at the initiation of their programs with different vendors. And there are vendors that allow the passing of the fees, and there are vendors that do not allow us to do that.
Okay, so you had mentioned ratepayers earlier for utility bills. And I mean, if we know what is the, just two more questions and that's all I'll need. The first is, what's the average cost of a utility bill for the average ratepayer in Oxnard, if we have that? And then if it's, 2%, we can kind of 2.35%, we can do an estimate of what that would be for them. But also, who else would be affected by this? Would this be like developers or other folks who pay fees to planning, that kind of thing, would be larger than what your average ratepayer might pay?
Yes, so a single family home on average would have about $150 to $180 per month in their utility bills. So $150 times 2.35%, which is our proposed rate, would have $3.53 of fees. This will also cover the developers, the business owners who would be paying business taxes. So let's say, for example, for a business tax of $1,000 at 2.35%, that would be $23.50. Whereas for a developer, for example, if they're paying a large amount like $10,000, it will be at $235.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. And that puts it in perspective for me about what we're looking at, and not just being ratepayers on this, but also those who have larger fees that are incurred when they do business with the city. So thank you very much. I appreciate your help on that.
And also
Thank
Oksana, Tehran, and Eden, people that just tuned in, we're talking about credit cards only, not by paying by check or in person.
We're talking about credit card payments and
That's right.
debit card payments and electronic check payments.
Exactly. So people that just tuning in, that I don't want them to think that have to pay that fee because if they send a check or they come in and pay in person. So thank you for that. And Councilwoman Basua.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Tehran, who asked a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask. But I do have a few more questions that were not asked. Eden, thank you for the staff report and the presentation. I got to learn, the fact that when a card isn't present, the charge is a little bit higher than when the card is present. So my question to you is, how are we going to determine what fee that is? Are you going to, go back to your team and figure out, what is the best way to do this in order not to charge the consumer more, but also keep our cost to a minimal? Do you anticipate that even after you go back, we will still have some kind of subsidy?
Our proposed rate of 2.35 will be across the board, whether they're present or whether they're paying by phone or using electronic check payments. We anticipate that the 2.35 may need to be increased in a future date because this is the average of the past 3 years, and based on our study, every year the costs go up. So we are anticipating that in the future we might have to go back to the council and request their approval if we want to cover 100% of the fees, of the transaction fees. We may need to increase it in the future. Okay,
so Eden, in regards to this, the average that you are planning to implement is the 2.35%. Will the city still be subsidizing some of the fees even after the 2.35 convenience fee is added? Because as I can see in the staff report, and this is, I think this is a great thing to do. I think a lot of people are doing it, even if we're paying online, we're seeing those convenient fees added. But I do see that, like for MasterCard, Word Elite, it's a 3.5% plus 20 cents in addition. So do you anticipate, and maybe you don't have this answer, that we will continue to be subsidizing?
Maybe for just a little bit more, because there are still some programs that we cannot pass on the convenience fees. And those programs the city has to continue subsidizing.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question here, electronic checks. Electronic checks to me signify when I'm calling in with my bank account information. Is that correct, or am I wrong in that definition of an e-check?
And the electronic check is used when a customer calls our interactive voice response system. We have a phone number where they can pay their utility bills, and they can either use a credit card or a check. So that's when that's what we call electronic check payments, when they pay over the phone with using a checking account.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Mayor, one last question.
Okay. That's good.
And Eden, how can our residents in the city of Oxnard avoid these penalties? By paying in what way?
We have many, many other ways of paying their bills. for utility bills alone. They can pay using by mail. They can send us a check by mail that has no charge to them. They can come in person. They can put it in our Dropbox. The easiest way also is by auto pay, where they can enroll in an auto pay system where the city will automatically draft their account with their monthly bill. That is free. They can also pay at 7-Elevens. Well, that is not free. It has $1.49 fee. So there are other ways for them to pay.
Okay, so thank you. So basically what I heard was the two ways to pay in order to avoid a fee is cash by a personal check that is written out, or auto pay.
Auto
Yes.
pay, yes.
Okay,
And-
thank you very much. Just my only comment is to staff is I'm going to definitely support this. Thank you, Eden and her team, for all the work that has been put in this. But I would suggest that we do ask staff to do a campaign to make sure that we educate our residents that have been paying by credit card or by electronic checks, that they understand that there are fees coming, and these are the ways that they can avoid the fees, and that we do an aggressive campaign in order to inform our residents of this change. So if the council is to approve it. So thank you.
And
Thank
that's
you,
an
Mayor.
excellent suggestion too, that we convey that message to the public. I think, can I, Eden, a third way to pay is in person eventually, once we open up, that a person can go in and pay in person once we open up the services, correct?
You are correct. We are open. The service center is open from 8 to 12 daily.
Okay, so they can walk in
Correct.
also besides mailing and besides doing the other things that can save them that fee.
Correct.
Okay, okay, and I'm going to support this because I'm looking back at the subsidies, and here in 2018, this whole thing was subsidized by $492,617.64. Then in 2019, the subsidy was $534,832.30, and in 2020, the subsidy was $520,565, and that's a lot of money that the city's been subsidizing this program. And of course, then you go back to the other cities that have been charging, for that fee, which is Thousand Oaks, City of Ventura, County of Ventura, and others. And I think that I know that a lot of people are going to be concerned, but it's still costing the city quite a bit of money to subsidize those items. And again, we're going to be the recommendation that we'll be saving $500,000 a year, which is really a tremendous amount of money to subsidize, especially at this time. So I think this is an approach that, as Councilwoman Basua says, we need to convey that message to the public to understand that we've been subsidizing this bill paying procedure for many, many years. And before I continue, Councilmember Tehran, you have another question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. One last thing, and actually the mayor had asked part of it, which was if you can remind the public just how much the subsidy was annually. And he had mentioned it's just under $500,000 or just over $500,000, depending on which of the last few fiscal years we were looking at. And so thank you for asking that or sharing that, Mayor. And one last thing, just so it's clear for the public, Ms. Alamary, is with this rate that we'll be putting when it goes to council, if it's approved, will the city be making any profit from this or making money off of charging this fee to anybody who pays with a credit card, debit card, or electronic check?
Councilman Tehran, no, we will not be making any profit from this. Government Code Section 6159 does not allow any city to collect more than what it costs the city to provide the service.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you again for the extra time, Mayor.
And Eden, I think that's a cost that the credit card charges. So you really be paying that to the credit card people. So we were paying that as a subsidy, but now the ratepayer pays it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much. So what's the pleasure of the board?
I will move the recommended action.
I will second.
Okay, first by Councilman Turan and a second by Councilman Wasua. Roll call.
Councilmember Pasua,
Yes.
Chair Zaragoza,
Yes.
Councilmember Turan.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0.
And going back again to public comments, do we still, those individuals, Andrea Payne and Douglas Portello, are they available or would you wait continue?
Mayor, Mr. Portello is available.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and this is items not on the agenda.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Portello, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Oh, good evening, committee chair, committee members, staff, and the public. I would like to speak to the finance committee about the fiscal management of our city of Oxnard and make the recommendation that the finance committee consider bringing in an outside independent consultant, an efficiency consultant, to look at how efficiently our city government is being run and how the money, the taxpayers' money, is being spent. It seems as though we have some inefficiency in the way that our government is being run. When Measure E passed, that put us at a double par for sales tax revenue in comparison to some of our neighboring cities like Camarillo and Thousand Oaks. Before Measure E, we were about $242 per capita for our sales tax revenue. Now we're at $484. The other cities are right around that 240 mark. I think Camarillo's a little less, but it's right around that figure. So why is it that we need double the par to run our city? I have a question about staffing. We are adding potentially, upon the recommendation of our city manager, about 56 and a half full-time positions to the budget. Now we have more money and staff can be added. So we're adding those positions, many of which are administrative, yet at the same time, I'm not aware, and maybe you can inform me or correct me, that we haven't added any public works workers, for example, in the Parks Department. So there's a lot of contracts that have gone on, but there's only, at this time, only one guy that fixes the irrigation systems. His name's Ken. He's a real good guy and works hard. But this is a city of 22 square miles and lots of repairs that need to be done. And we still have only one sprinkler guy. I'll give you another example for the solid waste management department. Back in 2016, we had 113 employees in that department. And since 2016 to 2020, we have added 60 full-time positions to that department. So now we're up to 173. So I know our city's growing, but I can't imagine that we're making that much more trash that we would need to raise the staffing from 113 to 173, adding 60 positions. So if we could get somebody that can independently look at some of these things where
Your time is
our
up.
money's being spent.
Thank you.
So I'd like you to
Thank you so much, Assistant City Manager Reed. I'd like to share a couple of questions on that.
Well, I just wanted to respond to that comment that in the new budget that you all just approved, Mayor, the Public Works Department is getting 13 new positions.
13 new positions, not
Yes.
60. Thank you so much for that. All right, so no other public comments, Madam Clerk?
Not at this time, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Our next item is the City Manager Department. Subject is preliminary American Rescue Plan investment ideas. And the recommendation that the Finance and Governance Committee begin the discussion about the American Rescue Plan ARPA, preliminary investment ideas and forward discussions and outcomes to the city council for the further deliberation. And we have some speakers. Sherry, you want to speak now or listen to the speakers first?
Well, that's up to you, Mayor.
We'll go ahead and go with the speakers and then we'll go in. So we have 1, 2, 3, about 5 speakers, and we start off with Ray Platel, followed by Douglas Bartello. Ray first, 3 minutes.
Mr. Blatel?
Hello?
Yes, hi.
Hello?
You have, sir, can you hear me?
Yes,
You have 3 minutes to speak.
thank you. Committee chair, committee members, city staff, and hopefully the listening public. In many cases, it is difficult to relate the investment idea to the ARPA category. For example, number 55, architectural design for fire stations 2, 3, and 5. Can someone please tell me what this has to do with replace sector revenue losses? Just because these stations may not have the latest architectural design doesn't mean there's revenue losses. This sounds absurd. On the other hand, considering all of the elements in number 13, which is the Saviors Road corridor effort and includes funding for the new City America contract, $140,000 seems way too little. And number 2, $2 million premium pay for city employees. Previously, I had asked the city staff if any of this money would be earmarked for city employees. Well, here's the answer. On page 26797 of the Federal Register, it is written, these workers in particular have borne disproportionate share of the health and economic impacts of the pandemic. Such workers include staff at nursing homes, hospitals, and home care settings, workers at farms, food production facilities, grocery stores and restaurants, etc. Thus, as I have already stated in a previous meeting, the folks actually deserving this premium pay are our local hospital staff, emergency care workers, eating establishments, etc. These are the personnel who have actually borne a disproportionate share of the health impacts of the pandemic. And number 70, public safety payroll costs for $1.827 million. Granted, the Federal Register language is pretty broad. For example, on page 26791, it says, for administrative convenience, the recipient may consider public health and safety employees to be entirely devoted to mitigating or responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency. But the caveat was if the employee or his or her operating unit or division is primarily dedicated to responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency. I don't think the city can support this argument in all cases. Moreover, hasn't public safety already received their fair share of the pie when they received $1.4 million from the CARES Act? How much is enough? Come on now, invest the money elsewhere. One last thing. In the city manager's pre-recorded presentation, I believe he invited ideas from the public. In tonight's agenda, item D1, staff are recommending the discontinuance of the subsidies for the convenience fee costs. Why not replace 1 or 2 of the items I already mentioned, in particular numbers 2 and 70, and continue this help for the citizens of Oxnard? As a matter of fact, in their Federal Register language, rule number 4 states, address negative
30
economic
seconds.
impacts, respond to the pandemic or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households. I think the Oxnard ratepayers need more help than the public safety personnel, or the city employees need the extra money. Numbers 2 and 70 total nearly $4 million. This money could be used to continue the convenience fee subsidy for the entire duration of the program and simultaneously meet all Federal Register criteria. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Douglas Bartello, followed by Stephanie Hagawara. Bartello, followed by Stephanie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Portello, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Yes, on my previous comment, I had stated that there's 56 and a half added staff in general that the city manager, not for the public works department. So I want that to be clear. I'm not suggesting that. And thank you for the answer. I didn't know that 13 staff were being added to public works. That was my question. But
Thank
the
you.
56 and a half are in general, not just to that department.
Mhm.
Now, as far as the use of this money, to give it to staff is wrong. It's just absolutely wrong. This money is from the federal government to make up for the loss of revenue and the deferments of infrastructure and all the other areas that they've included, internet, all those other things, not to be giveaways to city staff. I mean, maybe Alex Wynn is feathering his bed by offering this to the staff, but they're not the ones who suffered the most with the pandemic. A lot of city staff kept their jobs. They kept their employment. We have folks out here that this local government is supposed to be working for that really suffered under the pandemic and had far greater consequences to their families, to their economies. And then this added tax on top of it with Measure E is just ridiculous. And spending it more and more on administrative staff, and now giving this, they got their give backs. That was just a deferment. So that was stated rather clearly by Alex Wynn, that when federal or state monies became available, that those deferments would be returned to the employees. And he's keeping his promise. I think Alex should also get that. He's a staff member. He acts like he's a politician and that he acts like an elected official. Maybe he should run for office because he does a lot of politicking, but he's a staff person. This money should not be given to staff. We have the community that money should go to. There's infrastructure that's deferred. There's all kinds of areas that the citizens who pay these taxes, that money should be making up for the problem that occurred with the COVID recession. And that's really
30
the
seconds.
intention of this money. It's not there for you guys to be handing it out to each other. It's for the benefit of the citizenry and the public. And there were lots of deferments, and there's some efforts being made. Not enough, in my opinion, but that's not money that should be given to the staff, in my humble opinion. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Stephanie, Hagiwar, followed by Armando Delgado. Stephanie?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Hagiwara. I'd like to talk about the allocation of the American Rescue Plan Act funding. I am with the Oxnard Gem and Mineral Society. We are a sponsor of the Oxnard Performing Arts Center, meaning our commitment to hold our meetings and events at the OPAC helped get it built. We are disappointed to see that the Oxnard Performing Arts Center was not considered a council priority in the preliminary investment ideas. The buildings need long deferred maintenance and updated marquee, auditorium, landscaping, and parking lot improvements. The parking lot behind the ballrooms especially is a concern during setup and breakdowns at our annual event. Our participants are concerned with potential vehicle damage or accidents involving the uneven, broken pavement. We have vendors that will no longer come to our event due to the parking lot. It's easy to imagine other event planners having the same concerns. Furthermore, with climate change, air conditioning would be a welcome addition to the ballrooms and could be added when the new roof is installed. The reality is we are all looking forward to the day when we can emerge from social isolation, but we need a place where we can safely go to rejoin society. I'd like to remind you that there is a reason so many different groups of people came out to save the pack in 2019. It is a site that our memories have been made. It serves the many facets of our community, but it can do more. To continue to serve the community, to realize its full potential as a revitalizing force in South Oxnard, OPAC needs maintenance. Please allocate some of the American Rescue Plan Act funding to repair the Oxnard Performing Arts. It is the heart of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Armando Delgado, followed by Alicia Purcell. Armando Delgado.
Mayor Armando Delgado is not available at the moment.
Okay.
Alicia Purcell is available.
Okay, Alicia Purcell, please.
Alicia Purcell?
Okay, I think I'm on mute.
We can hear
you hear
you.
me?
You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I just want to remind the council members where this pile of money came from. It's not just free money. The federal government didn't have this money available either. It's all borrowing against future generations with incredibly reckless debt. And your grandchildren will still be paying the debt for this spending. Would you borrow from your grandchildren just to give a one-time bonus to current city employees? And we're talking about people who did not lose their jobs during the pandemic, who still received their paychecks and pension contributions during the pandemic. So if you're going to borrow from future generations, don't just use it to put money in your pockets today or for other short-lived benefits that really only benefit a small group of people. Use it for assets with a very long life that benefit nearly everyone in the city, so that people bearing this debt burden in the future might at least see some benefit out of it. There's some really important details that I did not see in the packet about the potential use of $2 million for payouts to city employees. There's no indication that I saw of whether it's being proposed to give $2 million to one employee on one extreme, or if it's, you know, to spread it across 1,500 employees or some other subset in between. There's a pretty big difference between those extreme options, and more information is needed. If it's some kind of subset of the employees, then the public should get to see a listing of the job titles which the city believes qualifies, and what amount is proposed for, you know, each of those job titles, so that we can compare it to the federal criteria for use of the funds. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, so Armando Delgado is not around yet.
Not available, Mayor.
Okay, so then again, the subject again is preliminary American Rescue Plan investment ideas. And the recommendation the Finance and Governance Committee begin the discussion about the American Rescue Plan, ARPA, preliminary investment ideas, and forward the discussion of the outcomes to the City Council for the further deliberation. So Sherry, Assistant City Manager. Mhm.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to remind the council members and members of the public what you heard from the city manager on his Measure M video and at the council meeting on this topic last week. So first, we have to remember this is all positive. This funding is over $59 million in additional funding that we're receiving from the federal government. Everything at this point is a bonus. And so although the council members and the community members may have different ideas of what's the best use of these funds, we have to keep reminding ourselves that this is all positive. Second of all, as the city manager mentioned, Oxnard's $59 million is intended to help our local government recover from the pandemic. So there's a whole host of other funds, and you heard the city manager list those off, that are available or will become available to help other sectors of society and the economy. And then third, we have to remember this is one-time funding, so we should use it on one-time expenditures, not ongoing expenditures. Fourth, philosophically, and this is a question for the council, do we want to make one or two large investments, or do we want to spend it across many different needs? The city manager recommended the latter because we do have so many needs, but we are looking to hear that from the council. Fifth, we should look at the investments that not only aid in the local government's recovery from the pandemic, but also have the ability to provide improvements and growth in the future. I think one of the speakers also mentioned that. And then finally, the list that staff provided to you all is a preliminary list of investment ideas. There's a lot of room for the council and members of the public to suggest and discuss additional ideas, both tonight and at the council meeting at the end of the month, and then again when the council returns to this topic in September. So we do encourage you to provide us with those additional ideas. We just this evening look forward to a positive and hearty policy debate, just kind of a general, the federal government gave us a lot of room, and we want to hear from the council members, as we heard from the members of the public, what are the sort of big picture directions that we should be looking at?
Okay. Thank you, Sherry. And I think one of the important things that we heard from the public, and we want the public to give us more input on some of the ideas that were recommended on this ARPA monies. And again, you know, I know we had some speakers today, which I appreciate. And hopefully, once we discuss and we send these items to the entire city council, then on the 29th, we can have additional people calling in, so we can determine exactly more or less what direction the public wants us to go. So at this time, council members, will start off with Council Member Tehran, and then followed by Councilwoman Basua, then I'll share some information too. Councilman Turan?
I'll let Councilwoman Basua go first. She had her hand up first.
Okay, Councilman Basua?
Thank you, Councilmember Turan. Appreciate it. Okay, so thank you to Ms. Klima for that summary. And I want to thank staff for the preliminary report and investment ideas. Great job. We have a total of, let's see, 85, what I call a wish list. And then we have an appendix of 33. And we do have obviously more ideas than what we can fund as far as funds are concerned. But my whole thing as a discussion to my colleagues is on the draft preliminary ideas that we got. On the last row, there is a alternative funding and application source. So what I would like staff to do, and what my recommendation would be, is I would like to see everything that we know 100% that can be funded by another source to be taken out of this list. So that would be my first recommendation. I know some of these things say CDBG, others say pending public-private partnership. But what I'm looking for is I'm looking for more of a condensed list that says these are the projects that have no money tied to them. Even if it's the possibility of a grant, I still want it on the original list. The only thing that I want removed, or that I would appreciate to get removed, is anything that we know we have funding for already. That would be my first suggestion. My second thing is, I think as a council, we will debate these ideas a little bit further, but to start today, my preference is going to be that we really focus on two of the sectors that we have, and one is replacing public sector revenue loss. The other one is the equity focused services and addressing the negative economic impacts. I think out of what we can use these funds for, to me, that is probably the most important thing to do. The water and sewer infrastructure is also really important to me, but those are, I believe, money that come from the enterprise funds that we might have the money already to do some of these projects. So even though I believe water and infrastructure and sewer is really important, in my opinion, we probably will have that money in the enterprise fund to provide some funding for that. I am obviously looking to address the negative impact, especially in South Oxnard, that we've had, and also to do some one-time purchases that I think would be extremely beneficial to the city, and that can be used for future generations to come. So those are my comments, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Turan.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And thank you to Councilmember Basua for those comments. I just want to also thank staff for taking a first crack at this. I know it's unforeseen funding from the federal government that we had a sense something would be coming, but not exactly what or how much. And so it's a great problem to have. How are we going to best utilize $59.5 million to make positive benefit or positive impactful benefits to our community? And so speaking kind of more broadly in policy terms, I see that Councilmember Basua had looked at the categories specifically those 6 categories we can spend on for priority areas or focus areas. For me, I can certainly look and see, I fall in those similar categories, but for me, I was looking at within the city itself and the way our city is structured, where do my my anticipated priorities fall? And for me, looking at the way our city's structured, I went through and looked at some of the potential projects on that list, and it fell into 2 main categories. And one is culture and community services, and the other is economic development. And for culture and community services, to get a little bit more specific about that, in a broader sense, things that have to do with enhancing or taking care of cuts or deferments for our recreation department, for our libraries, for youth and youth programmings, and infrastructure within culture and community services, such as the parks, the Police Activities League, and also looking at bicycle safety, bicycle and pedestrian safety, as we've talked about many times in this council and in these committees. And so for culture and community services and those subcategories, that's kind of how it fell for me. For economic development, looking at small businesses and how they were negatively impacted specifically by the pandemic. And also you can see in the list, not to get too specific, but the business corridors in South Oxnard along Saviors and Wainimi roads. And I certainly think our downtown businesses, as well as our other businesses and other parts of the city, whatever we have available to be able to invest in them, I think that would be great. But we were planning to do pre-pandemic work along the Saviors corridor anyways. We talked about as 5-year priorities for this council, working on the business corridors and Saviors and Wainimi anyways. And I think this is a great way to springboard that effort. And so those are what it came down to for me. I certainly have support for a number of the asks on there for public safety. And but those 2 categories were kind of biggest on my mind. Those, and then any infrastructure we can do that has no ties to other funding, as Councilmember Basua had mentioned, especially those that may be able to be funded by SB1 dollars or through any of our utility funds. So those are my comments, Mayor. And if we have any time for questions, I have a comment that I'll make later. I may not need to make it though. I'm interested in hearing from you and our staff. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember and Councilwoman Basua. I have a couple of items that I'd like to support, to focus on. And to start off with, supporting public health response. For example, I'm looking at number 8, homeless acquisition and land and permitting and homeless solutions. I think are really important that we try to get some support for the Homeless Solution Center, to make sure that we continue helping those folks that need help, and my understanding that potentially we might end up with some home key or some housing program funding that might happen in the future. And also the other one is item number 9 is homeless housing. And this is housing for temporary housing for staffing for emergency housing vouchers. I know there's a lot of people that lose their homes and so forth. So that I think is important for me to look at. And also on the other one is the relocation of the COVID-19 shelter from the Pell over to the Armory is another one important item for me. And also the other item 11 is the Oxnard employee pipeline and homeless vocational programs. This is to assist unemployed workers and also households to address homelessness issues, which is one focus item that I like to look at. The other item that I like to look at is also okay, let me see, here we go. Let's see. Is the water and sewer infrastructure. That to me is extremely important. And that would be on item 76 with the regional stormwater capture program, which I think is extremely important. My understanding is this is not a utility item right now, Madam City Manager at this time. That's correct, right?
Yes, stormwater projects are not funded
Are
by
not-
the
And
utilities.
not funded by utilities. So we need to, I think, water and sewer infrastructure, that's important to me. And then also the item 77, which is the design for East Village and Del Sol Park, the diversion and infiltration for the Oxnard Regional Stormwater Capture Project is another that I'd like to see. And the other one is the design for the Ventura Road, Second Street diversion and infiltration, Oxnard Regional Stormwater Capture Program. And number 79 would be the design for College Park, the storm drain capture program there, and also the Driffle Elementary School and storm capture program. Those programs, I understand, are paid currently by the general fund, and that would be a good opportunity to assist in that, in those programs. Also, the other one that I like to look at, the other focus group is the address the negative economic impacts, for the community, and those items are item number 6, and that's the community assessment report on Oxnard Business Attraction Program to help small businesses and nonprofits to continue, which is I think is really important. And then the other one is permanent outdoor patio programs to fund those grants for restaurants to create a permanent attraction and safe outdoor dining. A lot of cities have gone into that, and I think we need help in our downtown to assist those restaurants to, especially here in Oxnard where we have really nice weather, that really will help. Also, the downtown Wanimi revitalization corridor, going all the way down to Wanimi Road is extremely important for all of us, and that we help the South Oxnard area and revitalize it, and also downtown. And also the other one is promoting healthy families with the Pell program, which I think is number 32 in our, and this is the youth facilities, sport equipment, youth center supplies for promoting healthy, safety, family environments is important to me. And also the youth center over in Colonia Park, number 33. And this is the helping the Colonia Park, Durley Park, South Winds, Oxnard Center, sports equipment, youth, and supplies, and computers for those kids too. And the Wilson Center also needs a lot of help, number 34. This is the Wilson Arts Building reconstruction, ADA ramp. ADA, I think, is really important. And also the Wilson Arts Building to serve youth classes and special population program, which is really important. And also the downtown receptacles, I think, are important. And of course, the number 40, the downtown implementation and venues to help the small businesses and nonprofits help there too, which I think are really important. And of course, one of the things that I believe, that we need to help are with the premium pay for essential workers. We've had a lot of workers, police and fire, recreation. We had library individuals that helped tremendously. We had I know over at the city manager's office, we've had essential workers working every single day, where a lot of people were at home and so forth. They provide essential work, and I believe that we need to help them out the way we did, the grocery workers. And the last one that I have that I think is extremely important for me is broadband infrastructure, and that's number 47, and that's where we help youth and recreation centers, Southwind, Colonia, Durley Park, the broadband in some of the underprivileged and underserved communities need a lot of broadband help to help those individuals, especially now that we're going with the computer at home, homework again by laptops to those individuals, and they need help with the broadband that I think is broadband services that are really, really important to me. And the installation of the fiber that kind of materials, broadband materials infrastructure is extremely important to me. And that's basically what I have now at this time. Council members, Councilmember Tehran, you'd like to share additional information on this item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you and Councilmember Basua sharing your thoughts on this. And I have two things. The first is just regarding broadband investment. I believe we've mentioned in the past that there is potential for working with our local telecom companies to actually come to the table to provide a portion of that work or funding or whatever's needed for that. And I would hope that if that were to happen, that we could utilize this funding elsewhere rather than, I don't want to use the phrase let them off the hook, but rather be able to leverage the funding that they have, that they get from their ratepayers or their customers to really help with our broadband investment in the city. I believe and I agree that it's something that should absolutely be done, especially in light of the pandemic. But I also feel that there's a potential for a public-private collaborative effort on that to do it so that we can utilize these funds and other taxpayer funds in other ways. That being said, I know I mentioned more broad categories for myself, but hearing a couple of specific things that the mayor brought up, I would like to echo homelessness on that. And I agree with what Councilmember Basua said about anything that has funding already tied to it. Let's look at utilizing that funding and using this funding for other items. So many of the items around addressing homelessness on this list have state funding tied to them or potential funding for it. One thing I did not see on here, which has been brought up in the past, that I think is worth exploration is a safe sleep program. I know that in the past, the investigation of that found that it was something that needed a little bit more work and looking into. And so as a specific item that I did not see on here, but that I don't know has any specific funding tied to it, I would like to throw that out there as well. And the last thing is actually from the appendix as something that was not on the list, and that is increasing the funding to the utility rate assistance program. In the previous item, we just discussed the need to discontinue the subsidy for using credit cards to pay any number of the services that customers pay to the city. And one of the speakers had mentioned about using this funding for that. And it was in the appendix that that's possibly an option. And when the utility assistance program came to this committee previously, the mayor had thrown out, well, is there potential to increase it, which I don't believe was in the cards at the time, but perhaps using this funding, we can increase it somewhat if this were to go to council and it were to ultimately be approved, to raise it, I don't know, from $15 to $20 or whatever we think might work for that. But I just wanted to throw that out there as two specific things that I'm not sure fell under my categories, but are things that I think are worth mentioning and putting onto the table. And thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Before we go with Councilman Basua, let me share a little something about the broadband. In fact, when I was at the county, we were working with Nyland Acres, and we talked to Frontier, we talked to other individuals or agencies that wanted to help. They never came through. It took forever and ever. So I'd like to keep that in there. And if I'm looking at the potential alternative funding of CDBG, for example, or FCC emergency connecting funding, but I like to be prepped just in case on the broadband, so we can help. Again, like I said, this is a part of the promoting healthy childhood environments, which includes, again, as I mentioned, the installation of fiber for the South Oxnard Center, the Southwind Center, Colonia, Durley Park, and this is items or neighborhoods that are underserved neighborhoods that need that fiber and also the broadband infrastructure. So those I think are important, council member. And if we do get that funding, we can probably work with staff to redirect that funding. Council member Basua?
Thank you, Mayor. I think that the broadband and what you're speaking about is for the buildings that the city own, and maybe Ms. Klima can give us a better understanding of that. I think that investment is going to be an investment on our asset. So if we can get clarification on that, but also I wanted to make a comment on council members Tehran's in regards to the utility. Me personally, I'm not really comfortable on adding additional money to programs that we cannot sustain in the future. So I would hate to say, yes, let's go ahead and put money into the utilities. Instead of $15, let's do $20. But at some point, that money's going to run out. So I would really hate to put money into a program that eventually we're just going to have to get rid of because it's no longer going to be sustainable. And we've got to remember, this is one-time money. This is money that we're not going to always have. If we can improve an asset with it, I'm all for that. And those are my comments. Thank you.
And real quick, before we go to Tehran, one of the things I'm thinking about, maybe the staff can correct me, is that the broadband is to upgrade the Wi-Fi systems, the libraries or close to the parks or whatever, so that the neighborhoods can use that system or have the capacity to pick up the Wi-Fi's for their laptops. Councilman Tehran?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to Councilmember Basua for the comments. I would also be interested in getting clarification on the broadband items from the Deputy City Manager. But just regarding the utility rates thing, I feel that this is likened to the stimulus payments from the federal government, where we know these are not going to be ongoing. This is one time, or perhaps for this fiscal year or the remainder of the fiscal year, those who qualify for the rate assistance program will get $20 instead of $15. And if they qualify the subsequent year, it will go back to the rate that we set when it comes back to this committee and ultimately council going into the following fiscal year. So I just was hoping to qualify that there's no expectation it be ongoing permanently, but it be for this year to mitigate the effects, the economic effects of the coronavirus on our families. But thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'm sure the staff is taking note of that, what you just shared. Thank you so much for that, Councilmember.
And Mayor, we to the council members' questions, there's some items on here like the, installation of fiber to the youth recreation centers or to the libraries that do bolster the city's facilities. And then there are others that are more looking to move fiber out to the community, like the last mile fiber and so forth. So certainly that's an area that if the council members have an opinion on that matter and want to focus not just on broadband generally, but want us to either focus on city facilities or focus on getting it out to the community, that would be good to learn.
That'd be good too.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, before we end up a little bit, I'd like to share too that we had we want the public to really participate, but we have some information that was given by Stephen Nash, and it talked about the building out of the broadband. He talks about that, which is part of what he mentioned here too in his report, and also revitalizing the corridor from downtown to Wanimi Road, and the whitening of the sidewalks and so forth. So we have information from Stephen Nash and also from Robert Part that talked about ensuring the adequate of future water supplies, and can we use a desalination plant as a candidate for the future? We look at that water and also make sure that we have the proper sewer infrastructure and underground distribution water lines, and also we have from Roger Poirier that mentioned about spending some money and replacing our park restrooms. And also Roger talked about lighting in the parks, which is really important, and also bringing a pool to Campus Park, swimming pool, and also talked about other items that are part of the community. So that's the kind of input that we need, from the community. So this is going to be turned into the clerk. So with that in mind, let me see, what do we have here? That's the last item. Do we have to submit a motion on this, Mr. City Attorney? Okay, let me see. So it's just comments from the council members.
So this was to solicit your ideas, and this will be going to council for further discussion, as well as the rest of the committees later tonight.
Okay, so do we vote on this item, or no, we don't?
I don't see that there's a vote required.
Okay, Councilmember Sharon.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we conclude this item, I would just like to request that staff also communicate to the public a little bit more on their ability and the channels they have to participate in this discussion moving forward before it comes back to the full council by the end of this month, and then ultimately back in September, when it's going to have a little bit more targeted and decision focused discussion. So any way that we can include folks in this and have them be able to see it and digest it and provide input to council and to the city would be great.
Thank you. And again, I just want to share with you that the public, if they're listening, if you're not going to participate in these 3 items or the 3 committees, the 29th, give us your input, and that would really be appreciated, because this is here for the community, and thank you for those items. So if there's no additional items in this, then any future agenda items, council members? Tehran, and if not, no. Okay, so then we're adjourned, and we'll be back at 6:45. Thank you.